Dwarves, the staple of fantasy, so much that our beloved, gruff, stout grandpas are seen by the younger generation as stale and boring. Well, you either lack imagination or are misinformed, my friend. Be prepared to walk the fairy roads and meet the many dwarfs that have been spawned by the scribes of fantasy.
Folks and fairy tales. While dwarves in fantasy are often based on those of Tolkien's Middle Earth, the British writer himself in turn was inspired by Norse and other Western European mythology, and of course, old folklore. Thus we start where it began, with the old lore of fairy tales. One of the problems of classical interactions of dwarves and other mythology is, of course, language. Often, one creature can take a life on his own, just by this. Gnomes, kabouters, kobolds, and lutins. All are described as tiny magical forest creatures, named by the culture they were seemingly found in. Secondly, is their classification. Dwarves, gnomes, and even sprites and goblins are classified as just elves or fey folk, puss in boots, elven folk, leprechauns, elven folk, even giants. You guessed it, elven folk. Luckily, these elves can be split into the four elements. Air and water takes up species like pixies and tritons. Fire fae were unlucky enough to be hijacked by Christianity and often replaced by just devils. The larger group is of course the earth fae, because they're usually commoner, would be interacting with them the most. So dwarves, gnomes, giants, trolls, and even goblins are in their way protecting the land. For example, near the places where I live in the lowland, creatures like gnomes and giants are the most spoken of. Gnomes are protecting fields and forests, while the region known as the Campen is roughly translated as the Giant Land. It's then of course no surprise that one particular city near it is famous for two giants, like Langawapper and the giant Antigone, who was slain by a Roman centurion and its hand was thrown into the river the Snechte. By this, according to legend, the city got this name, Antwerp. We're getting off track by focusing on the larger cousins. In the end, legends about these fey-like creatures were kept alive by word of mouth, by its locals, by stories of Eldritch horrors and a legacy of older cultures and faiths of old Europe. By this, many of the Fae have no connection with the dominated religion Christianity, and thus often Fae seems to lack of soul, whatever that means. Folk stories about Faes were later dumbed down for younger audiences by the Brothers Grimm and later others. It was quite an achievement for the Brothers Grimm to change stories of eldritch horrors into what people consider now stories for young children. Only later for edge lords believing fairy tales were too kiddie and bringing life to the fantasy genre. We however go deeper into these childish fairy tale stories and see how it has changed the modern take of our beloved dwarves through fantasy. Starting with a more magical fairy tale, Rumpelstiltskin. May the hair one holds dear never fall out.